Please welcome to the stage Vice President of External Affairs for Arnold Ventures, Sebastian Johnson, Mayor of Hercules, Alex Walker-Griffin, Mayor of El Carmen, Omar Jossue Pineda Rodriguez, Mayor of Sausalito, Melissa Blaustein, and Mayor of Santa Rosa del Cabal, Rodrigo Toro, for the Young Leaders of the Americas panel organized by Biennial of the Americas.
Good afternoon and welcome. Thank you all so much for joining us today for this panel. My name is Sebastian Johnson on behalf of Arnold Ventures. We are so thrilled and honored to support this panel with young leaders from across the Americas. Arnold Ventures, for those of you who aren't aware of our organization, we are a philanthropy that is rooted in evidence-based policy and bipartisanship here in the United States. We work on a number of different issue areas, from criminal justice to healthcare, housing, democracy reform, public finance, all issues that these mayors in their day-to-day are intimately familiar with and that are incredibly important to youth. So I'm thrilled to kick off this conversation and to really get us started understanding the journey of these young leaders and understanding what advice they might have for all of you. So what I'd like to do to start us off, guys, is just to have each of you introduce yourselves to the audience and answer the question, tell us when you first knew that you wanted to run for office. Start with Alex.
All right. Well, good morning, everybody. My name is Alex Walker-Griffin, and I'm the mayor of Hercules, California. It's about 20 minutes north of San Francisco and 20 minutes south of Napa in the greatest state ever. I'm 25 years old. I got elected when I was 23 back in 2020. And really what made me decide and kind of realize I wanted to run for office at some point was I was 17 years old. My city's a Bayside community, and I was walking along it one day, and I noticed the waterfront was really dirty. So I went to the city manager and went to the city council during public comment and said, hey, I'm going to clean up this waterfront for free. Just give me the permits. And well, my city manager gave me a polite email saying, no, you can't do that. And really, I just said, I'm going to do it myself, and I ended up handling it myself. But that was the moment that I realized, because I felt like so many cities in my area were going forward, but my city was always going backwards. So that's when I realized it.
Omar.
Ok, muchas gracias. Soy alcalde de El Salvador, un municipio pequeño, alrededor de 15,000 habitantes. Queda a 20 minutos más o menos de la ciudad. Es un municipio relativamente pequeño en territorio y en población, pero una de las problemáticas principales que se afrontan dentro de mi municipio es la exclusión social y la falta de oportunidades. Creemos que eso fue uno de los impulsos más fuertes que nos determinó para poder impulsarnos dentro de la política salvadoreña. Me considero el alcalde más joven de El Salvador, pues únicamente tengo 25 años de edad y asumí de 23, al igual que el alcalde de Hercules. Hercules, sí, bien pronunciado, ¿eh? Y actualmente pues tengo 25 años, pero me eligieron de 22 y inicié mi política de 19 años. Así que muy orgulloso de representar la política de El Salvador acá en Estados Unidos y con grandes amigos de las grandes ciudades de acá. Muchas gracias.
Hi, everyone. It's such an honor to be here on this panel with these amazing young leaders. I love El Salvador. We talked about this a little bit backstage.
Sí.
So I've spent my entire career and basically my life driven by wanting to make an impact, and I worked for some inspiring politicians. I worked for Gabby Giffords, I worked for Barack Obama, and I was really interested in making change, but I never really felt called to do it myself until after the 2016 election in the United States. And I think no matter what party you're a part of, that was a demonstration of a threat to our democracy and a divided country, and a time for all of us to really get involved and step up and do something. And I felt like I had absolutely no control over what was happening at the national level, and there was nothing I could do. But I knew that at the local level, I could change the way my community looked, and I could do things to improve our roads, roads or to embrace equity or to take on climate change. So I ran for the first time at age 29 in 2017. I lost, and I share that because I want to remind all of the young leaders here that you're going to lose a lot of times, and you got to keep going, and you can't give up, and you have to be resilient. But I kept going because, I believed that it was possible to make change in my community. So in 2020, I ran again, and I was elected. And I'm the old person on this panel. I am 34. So I am the millennial, the token millennial, here to take all of your millennial questions about avocado toast, whatever you might have, in addition to taking on climate change. So it's a real honor to be here with you guys.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. I'm trying to do this in Spanish because I feel more comfortable in Spanish. Anyways, mi nombre es Rodrigo Toro, soy de un municipio que se llama Santa Rosa de Cabal. Es el corazón del paisaje cultural cafetero donde se produce el mejor café del mundo. Y es un municipio maravilloso, tiene un alcance ecológico increíble, producimos agua, líquido vital para 4 millones de habitantes, somos 100,000 habitantes y decidí hacerme alcalde cuando me di cuenta un día que los jóvenes tenemos que tener una posición determinante que garantice las transformaciones de nuestras comunidades. Mi municipio llevaba 3 alcaldes consecutivos en la cárcel por corrupción, la gente estaba supremamente cansada de la tradición política y fue así como los jóvenes nos organizamos, recorrimos las calles de todo el municipio y logramos convencer a la ciudadanía de que teníamos derecho a levantar la mano a trabajar por nuestras comunidades. Actualmente soy uno de los alcaldes más jóvenes del departamento y estamos muy contentos por las transformaciones que se han logrado y para mí es un placer y un honor poder estar compartiendo con mis colegas alcaldes también de todo el mundo y con ustedes que son los próximos y futuros líderes alcaldes y por qué no presidentes del mundo. Un abrazo.
Thank you guys so much. That was a fantastic start. Well, let's start on the first topic of climate change. Arnold Ventures, we are invested in solutions that are moving us from fossil fuel economy to a green, sustainable economy. Rodrigo, I know that you in particular emphasize this as an issue for your city, that you guys are one of the leading producers both of coffee but also of water for your country. But would like to ask you, how do you address climate change from the office of mayor? And then would like to open that up for everyone else as well.
Bueno, muy bien. El cambio climático es una amenaza que tiene el mundo en general. Y se tiene que afrontar no solamente nationwide, como desde el país, desde el mundo, pero lo más importante desde las propias comunidades, ¿no? La conciencia ambiental, el hecho de que los niños desde la escuela entiendan la dimensión del problema que enfrentamos porque nos estamos consumiendo los recursos, no solo los nuestros, sino los de las futuras generaciones. Entonces nos estamos robando el futuro de las generaciones cuando estamos consumiendo recursos que ni siquiera son nuestros. Entonces es un debate bien importante porque sí tienen que haber unas transformaciones que nos permitan de manera inmediata poder hacer la transición hacia las energías renovables, que podamos proteger el agua como recurso vital y por supuesto los recursos naturales que tenemos y que tenemos que mantener en el tiempo. Colombia hoy decidió con un nuevo gobierno, que esperamos que lo haga muy bien, detener las exploraciones mineras en materia de petróleo. Entonces no van a haber más exploraciones petroleras, pero eso es un tremendo desafío que tenemos para la industria, porque nuestro país ha sido una industria fósil. Digamos que el mayor ingreso del país ha sido el petróleo en el tiempo, ¿no? Y ahora tenemos el desafío de encontrar otras fuentes económicas como lo es ahora el turismo. Entonces estamos trabajando muy duro para que Colombia se pueda visibilizar como ese país resiliente que a través del proceso de paz puede mostrar una cara nueva a los ciudadanos, pero además a todo el mundo, para poder garantizar que estas decisiones que se están tomando se pueden mantener en el tiempo, porque el presidente dura 4 años, pero el próximo gobierno, si no continúa esas políticas, pues va a haber un retroceso. Entonces el desafío es que se haga muy bien para que se pueda mantener en el tiempo y que definitivamente podamos pasar de la minería, de la explotación de recursos no renovables a las energías renovables, hacia la electricidad, y eso nos compete a nosotros como gobiernos locales trabajar muy duro en la educación para que la gente entienda el papel y la obligación que tenemos como ciudadanos de esas transformaciones.
I'll hop in. I'm happy to hop in. And I really appreciate that you started that conversation by saying, listen, this is something we're dealing with at the national level, but we need to look at every single level of government, from the community to the classroom. And that's why conferences like this are so important, bringing together city leaders, because I really believe change happens at the local level. Organizations like the Conference of Mayors and the League of Cities, who give us the opportunity to share best practices with what you're doing in Colombia, what we're doing in California. So I like to say we're small but mighty in Sausalito. You might think if you're from a small town, like you're from a smaller town, you can't have as much impact. But I want to tell you, in Sausalito, since 2005, we have personally decreased our emissions by 26%. We have a climate action plan, and we went a step further and established a low emissions action plan, which has tangible steps that we have to take to meet the 1.5 degrees Celsius goal. And we are more than on track. We're ahead of our goals. We're doing things like electrifying all of our new buildings, but we're doing basic backyard things that you might not think of, like outlawing gas leaf blowers and then providing electric leaf blowers to take out at the library, because you can't necessarily buy a new one. We're changing the way we look at waste, because this is a small, not sexy solution, but one that's critically important and has big impact. So the small steps we're taking are decreasing our footprint, but we're also thinking bigger. We have a sea level rise task force, and we're mitigating what we have as a waterfront community to see what it's going to mean for 5, 10, and 15 years from now, and how do we start taking necessary steps to mitigate sea level rise and protect our community. And we're a waterfront community, and we see the potential for innovation in all of you. I'm really excited to see so many young people here showing up at the Youth Summit and at the Summit of the Americas, because I know that you know that it's up to you to come up with the solutions to our most pressing problems. It's not about making profit, it's about solving problems. So we are creating a blue economy hub in Sausalito, and we've just launched a new nonprofit, Sea Futures, that's going to focus on harvesting innovative blue economy technologies. So just because you're small doesn't mean you can have an impact. That goes for cities, that goes for people as well. So make sure that you're making your voice heard on this important debate.
Yeah. Thank you, Melissa. That's awesome. And thank you, Rodrigo, as well. I have to echo that. So when I got onto my city council, historically, my city was one of the more conservative cities in our area, and it was predominantly led by Republicans. So this progressive, young, 23-year-old was a real big threat to a lot of people, because I would bring up stories of climate change. So I'm in the Army National Guard, and in 2018, we had the Camp Fire. It was the state's deadliest and most destructive fire ever. My job as a military police officer, but our primary job was evacuating people, and it was my responsibility to know who was dead and alive. Now, that was an awesome responsibility. And I said a story yesterday, but it was over the radio that I heard that the fire was moving at a football field's length, 100 yards in 3 seconds. There's no way you can outrun that. There's no way you can outdrive that. There's nothing you can do. So the next day, when we're doing reconnaissance on the people who lost their lives and trying to assess who's dead and alive, I said this can never happen again. So in my city, one of the very first things that I did when I took office was establish an ordinance that requires all new development to be 100% electric. And you see, because like I said, I come from a pretty conservative town, anyone who was a big fan of gas immediately thought this was a threat. But I have to challenge that, because industries change all the time. Once upon a time, we were using whale oil to power our lamps. Once upon a time, we were using coal, and then that turned into oil. So technology is always going to advance. And in my area, we have 3 refineries that surround us. So asthma rates are crazy high. And so anything that we can do is obviously something. So when people talk about the small states, oh no, it's not an impact at all. Yes, it is, because now with the new development that we have, and we have 962 units that are going to be in our city in the next 5 years, we're not going to be having gas stoves. So we're going to reduce our rates of children with asthma, all these chronic illnesses, and the possibilities for people to pass away from carbon monoxide poisoning. This is not just short-term, in-the-moment thinking. This is looking into the future. Like I said, I'm 25 years old, and I'm a part of Generation Z, and I joke around and say Generation Z is the generation that gets nothing but bad news constantly. And eventually, I do want to have a family, but I do want to have, hopefully, 2 daughters someday that can actually live and thrive in this world. So that's what's kind of my situation with that.
Ok, muchas gracias. Yo, al igual que mis colegas, Rodrigo, ¿sí? de Colombia, mencionó que tiene un proyecto de agua potable para la ciudad e incluso para las demás ciudades cercanas. Al igual forma, mi municipio, El Salvador, estamos extrayendo agua potable de los pozos porque se ha generado una problemática que superficialmente se nos han secado. Muchos ríos se nos han secado. En El Salvador se les conoce a pequeños reservorios de agua que la gente hace de manera artesanal como pocitas y se nos han secado también. Pero ¿qué es lo que nosotros hemos hecho conforme a esta problemática? Y es que hemos reforzado la ordenanza medioambiental de mi municipio. Hemos creado políticas y sí, sancionando muchas veces a los infractores que nos están talando árboles, porque creemos, hace poco, y voy a hablar un poco coloquialmente sobre lo que es El Salvador, y es que allá hay un árbol que es ceiba y conacaste. Son unos árboles que son vida, pero la gente los usa para madera, los corta, y luego pues vienen los impactos ambientales justamente donde ellos han talado los árboles. Nosotros estamos regulando toda esa problemática por medio de la Oficina Medioambiental y estamos llegando a las familias infractoras y les estamos haciendo conciencia. Me botó un árbol, va a sembrar 10 árboles. Y es justamente lo que nosotros hemos reforzado en mi municipio, y la extracción de agua es un problema, porque yo de energía eléctrica pago alrededor de $22,000 al mes, relativamente bastante para mi municipio, porque cada pozo, que son 4, me consumen alrededor de $4,500 cada uno en energía eléctrica. No tengo el dato de los kilowatts, pero hoy estoy por usar energía renovable y estoy tratando la manera de conseguir un proyecto de energía renovable con planta solar para minimizar el impacto medioambiental en mi municipio. Creo de que esto va a ser una posible solución a futuro y creo que también mi municipio lo va a agradecer mucho.
Quiero decir muchas gracias por todo lo que estás haciendo, porque you are on the front lines of climate change. The issues that Alex and I are facing, electrification of buildings, is very different from the challenges that you're facing, where you're literally planting trees in your community because it's being used to cook. Whereas we're trying to get people to stop using gas in their fancy ovens. And you are on the front lines every day making clear impact by doing tangible things. So I appreciate that contrast. It's huge to hear that from you.
Muchas gracias, de verdad.
Yeah, I wanted to, and I was thinking about that contrast as well, Melissa, and I was thinking about something that you said in your response, which is that some of these issues are life and death. And as mayors, you guys are really on the front lines of protecting your citizens and ensuring that people can live long and healthy lives, particularly young people. So I want to transition to another topic that disproportionately affects young people, which is community violence, particularly gun violence. This is an issue that Arnold Ventures has invested a number of millions of dollars of research into: gun violence research, community violence interventions. Easy access to guns has resulted in gun violence being the leading cause of death of children and adolescents in America. Rodrigo and Omar, I know that you also have had struggles with gang violence and community violence in your countries. From the office of mayor, how can you address public safety, but also ensure that those who are perpetrators and also victims of violence are getting the supports that they need?
Bueno, muy bien. Digamos que cada comunidad tiene un contexto distinto. El origen de la violencia en Estados Unidos es distinto al origen de la violencia en nuestros países. El origen de la violencia en Colombia deviene de la desigualdad social, de la falta de oportunidades. Yo creo que si algo ha funcionado en nuestro gobierno y que lo mantenemos con mucha convicción son los programas de intervención social, ¿no? Educación fundamental, garantizar que todos los niños estén estudiando y que tengan las condiciones para estudiar, garantizar su transporte escolar, garantizar su alimentación escolar, fundamental, y en eso hemos hecho unos esfuerzos importantes para que los niños de áreas rurales que no tienen transporte escolar lo puedan tener. Pero además de la educación, tenemos que decir que mantener el tiempo de los chicos ocupado es fundamental. Entonces, el arte, la cultura y el deporte son las mejores herramientas y los mejores vehículos para poder mitigar los problemas de esa violencia que tiene el origen precisamente en las comunidades cuando existe esa desigualdad social. Entonces tenemos las escuelas populares de artes, las CEPAS, en donde todos los niños de manera gratuita pueden estudiar cualquier disciplina artística o cultural, y asimismo a nivel deportivo, cualquier disciplina deportiva, pero además les damos incentivos tan importantes como que, por ejemplo, ejemplo, en el caso del deporte, le damos una vivienda gratuita al mejor deportista del año. Vivienda a su familia, y eso lo que hace es que los jóvenes se incentiven y por supuesto compitan inigualablemente para tener buenos resultados y poder tener esa vivienda al año. Eso es un muy buen resultado que hemos tenido, pero además el arte, la música, el teatro, la poesía, todo lo que tiene que ver con el deporte, tenemos más o menos 32 disciplinas deportivas abiertas, públicas y gratuitas, y vamos a las comunidades más vulnerables donde más problemas hay y garantizamos que esos niños puedan estar formándose en deporte, en arte y cultura y además en la educación. Y de esa forma hemos podido garantizar que hayan menos pandillas, que hayan menos, obviamente que las líneas de la delincuencia juvenil se vayan cortando y que las brechas de la desigualdad social las vayamos achicando.
You see how awesome this guy is? Oh my God, this is so inspiring. So for me, I have a pretty heavy background in gun violence prevention. I used to be a part of March for Our Lives California, and I used to run their policy wing. So there was a couple things that we did under my leadership that really improved gun violence issues in the state of California, one of which I actually still have the bill on my phone. It's a Word doc, AB 2617 by Assemblyman Gabriel. And what that does is it strengthens gun violence prevention orders. Because the problem in America in particular, if you go across the state lines, in particular, if you go from California to Arizona, gun laws completely change. And like I said, I'm in the Army. This is kind of something that's pretty surprising to a lot of people. I'm the commander of my unit. But do you think I could just have access to my gun whenever I want it? Absolutely not. There's 3 people I gotta go to and fill out a piece of paper before I can even get it. And I just can't walk up to the people and say, hey, I want it, give it to me. We gotta have an actual reason. We're going to the range. But in America, it's so freaking crazy. I have a lot of family from Nebraska, Arizona, and you can just walk into a store with an AR-15. I'll never forget going to the grocery store with my grandma and just seeing it slung over. I'm like, I didn't know we were in Iraq. I didn't know we were in Afghanistan. This is not a combat zone. This is a grocery store. But another thing that me and my friends did when I was still a part of March for Our Lives was we got $17 million added to the state budget for resources for LGBT teens, because gun violence comes in different forms, right? It can be your typical homicide, or it can be suicide. So really what we have to do is start evaluating the root causes of not only what kind of gun violence we're getting into, but how we can mitigate it. Because every life is always going to be a tragedy. There's no doubt about it. But a lot of this stuff, it's about prevention. When it comes down to mental health, especially to some of my friends in these Republican states, if you know that someone is going through some struggles, they probably shouldn't need access to a firearm. But there's one thing that I want everyone to remember about this when they go out and think about guns. I'll never forget this. I was still in basic training, and when we were on the rifle range learning how to shoot our rifles, we were told something that I will never forget, and that it's with a gun, you have half the power of God. And in America, we don't respect that. We protect guns, inanimate objects that could sit right there all day, before we prioritize the lives of others. So what we're doing now in Hercules is we're developing a gun registry. So if you own a gun in the city, you have to register with the police. Obviously, you have to register with the county and the state and so forth. So that way, if something happens, we can pop it. We can pop in before something comes off. But at the same time, too, we have a better track record of who to look for.
This question is always really hard for me to answer because things related to gun violence really changed for me after January 8th, 2011. I worked for Congresswoman Giffords on her last campaign. So when we talk about gun violence, for me, it's not a theoretical, it's not a could happen. People that I really cared about, we lost that day. And I am truly devastated and angry that that was over 10 years ago, and I don't really feel like that much has changed. And when I look at my government and I look at my policymakers in the eye, it's hard for me to believe. It's truly astonishing. And as mayor, I'm doing everything I can at the local level. I'm part of our gun safety collaborative. We did a gun buyback program in our county. We routinely, unfortunately, host gun violence drills for our staff and our community. But this is one of those issues that should be our issue. Gen Z, I'm looking at you. I know I'm a millennial, but this needs to be the issue that has movement, because in the same way that we're all angry about climate and we're finally realizing that it's a life or death issue, this is an obviously life or death issue. Children are dying and nothing is changing. And I'm sorry if I'm getting emotional about this, but it is hard for me to separate my feelings from the reality of what we're dealing with gun violence in America. And we can do what we need to do in California, but if we don't get more people from across the United States, and also mayors from other municipalities all over the world saying, what are you doing, America? You're telling us we're violent? We have gang violence in our country? We're not killing children in schools. So I would just say, we have to do more. We have to do better. I'm doing everything I possibly can with all of my power to talk about it, even if it's tough to talk about, but I really need some help. So I'm looking at this next generation of leaders here saying, please keep talking about it. Please make it your issue. Please.
Y una situación también en El Salvador es que ustedes históricamente conocen que El Salvador era uno de los países más peligrosos y me atrevo a decir incluso que el más peligroso del mundo. Teníamos un índice de violencia o de muerte que de cada 100.000 habitantes pues habían alrededor de 50. Y gracias a Dios y por las políticas públicas que se han optado de seguridad dentro de la jurisdicción del Estado y localmente dentro del municipio, se ha logrado controlar hasta en un 95% lo que es la violencia. Y estoy yo como testimonio para poder contar ante el mundo y ante las generaciones de que realmente eso es efectivamente tal cual como se dice en El Salvador. La violencia, la pandilla 18 y la Mara MS, que allá hablar de esos temas en El Salvador era muy peligroso. La gente incluso cuando le llegaban a hacer reportajes y le preguntaban, mire, aquí que es peligroso, la gente no daba entrevista, se escondía, cerraba la puerta, cerraba la ventana y prefería incluso de que no le llegaran a preguntar sobre esos temas. Y efectivamente la vida de ellos corría peligro. Si alguien se atrevía a hacer un tipo de opinión de esta naturaleza, dentro de una semana, lastimosamente, esa persona era asesinada. Aunque en Estados Unidos la compra de armas es un poco más fácil, en El Salvador es bien difícil, pero allá el corriente de ingreso es de manera ilegal y es justamente como ellos logran conseguir estos ilícitos para cometer sus delitos. Pero hablando por El Salvador y por las políticas públicas que se han optado en temas de seguridad, hemos mejorado mucho y que ahora están llegando turistas a conocer nuestras playas. Hablábamos con
Salvador.
Exacto, de Surf City, que es un paraíso tropical, hablando sobre la playa El Tunco, ¿sí? y de Sunset Park. Y invito a que puedan participar de esta nueva cultura salvadoreña que se está creando, pero siempre hay problemas, siempre hay un margen de error. Siempre hay gente que podríamos decir que ha sido capturada injustamente, pero para eso, como dijo el presidente, existe el órgano judicial que se va a encargar de que si es inocente debe salir y si es culpable debe ser condenado. Gracias.
Thank you all for engaging on that important topic. I want to turn to another topic that's really important to youth, which is higher education. We've really focused on accountability and transparency in higher education. In the United States, we have some of the most unaffordable higher education, a spiraling debt crisis. Folks are getting degrees that don't really lead to sustainable employment. Mayor Griffin, I noticed that in your bio, you actually attended a community college, and I know that that's something that we should be encouraging more of. But I wanted to ask you, both about your experience in higher education and how you as mayor are opening up those pathways to more affordable higher education.
Oh boy, this is one of my favorite topics to talk about. So for me, I didn't think I was going to go to college at all. I had straight Fs the majority of high school, and I didn't even take the SATs because I got sick. So the only option for me was community college. And then when I got to community college with my head down and all my friends going to UC Berkeley, Harvard, and Yale, I felt ashamed, but it was really there that I blossomed. I joined student government, became the student body president, and midway through my term, I was 19 years old. This opportunity came up to join the California Community Colleges Board of Governors, and that's the board that runs the California Community College system. It's the largest system in the entire country, and it's the second largest in the world behind China, 2.3 million students. I applied to be on the board. I didn't think I was going to get it. 6 months and 20 interviews later, I got a call from the governor's office saying that the governor signed off on my name, and now I'm the voice of 2.3 million people. So the proudest thing, we did a lot of cool stuff. We did a lot of things to uplift undocumented folks, people of color, but to this day, I can die tomorrow, and I will always list this on my little brochure of my funeral, is that I was the lone student to vote to make community college tuition free in California. And it's so crazy. We have some of the best institutions, thank you, some of the best learning institutions in our backyard. UC Berkeley's 15 minutes away from me, Stanford's an hour away, but so many people can't go there. I was talking about this actually yesterday. So in California, education as a whole, that's K through 12 and higher ed, is only 5% of the state's budget. Higher education is 3%. So that funding right there is not nearly enough. So they say, let's put more money into Cal Grants, right? That's not going to do anything. What we need to do is expand how much we fund education so people aren't going into debt. When I got to the four-year St. Mary's College of California, I got a couple of loans from the federal government, and they said, here's Sally Mae, figure it out. So the downfall of Sally Mae is going to be the best day of my life. So in addition to that, I'm just saying, in addition to that, what I've been doing is partnering with the schools in our area and the major corporations, because living in the Bay Area, there's a lot. Google's down the road, Twitter's down the road, saying, hey, get these folks scholarships. And not only just get the folks from Hercules scholarships, get the kids from Richmond, all the kids in the ghetto in the hood who get overlooked all the time. So San Pablo, it sits in Richmond and San Pablo, historically marginalized communities, mostly Mexican, Salvadorian, and black. They would always get overlooked at UC Berkeley right down the road. So we created a tag program that says if this student maintains this GPA, they can automatically go to UC Berkeley. And that's still in place to this very, very day. So education is huge. And just because you're at the city and you don't directly interact with them, that doesn't mean you can't do something about it.
That's excellent. And I want to ask a little bit of a follow-up to Omar. I know in your city, you've really focused on entrepreneurship programs for young women in the agricultural sector. I know that's a different pathway to employment and success. I wanted to give you an opportunity to talk about that.
Ok, realmente en mi municipio estamos incentivando a los jóvenes con capital semilla. El detalle es que en El Salvador la universidad o la educación superior es muy exclusiva. Llámese en términos económicos muy difícil de alcanzar. Y aunque se han optado también por algunos programas, llámese Roque Dalton, que es uno de los programas que se dan en el país, para que las personas puedan obtener una beca universitaria y se le cubren los gastos totales de lo que es el estudio o la carrera universitaria. Pero retomando, creo que los programas de emprendimiento es una opción más y no solucionamos todo el problema, pero tratamos la manera de educar a nuestros ciudadanos de que no vayan por el pescado, sino que ellos comiencen a pescar. Y es uno de los dichos que tenemos en El Salvador, porque en mi país existe mucho el asistencialismo, el hecho de llegar a donde el alcalde y donde funcionarios públicos y poder obtener algo de manera muy fácil y sin mayor complicación. Creo de que eso lo estamos minimizando, se le están dando programas de emprendimiento, capital semilla. Estamos dándoles cerdos, estamos dándoles comida y ellos están produciendo y están teniendo cerditos y luego ellos venden carne y así están obteniendo sus ingresos, pero también mi municipio se encarga de la producción de flores dentro de este territorio. Tenemos alrededor de 6.8 kilómetros cuadrados, es muy pequeño el Carmen, pero tenemos alrededor de 300 viveros que producen flores, plantas y que las comercializan a nivel de país a un costo realmente muy bajo, y estamos capacitándoles para que ellos puedan incluso sacar el costo, sacar su ganancia y poder tener un ingreso digno y así poder suplir muchas de las necesidades que se tienen de nuestras familias carmelenses. Y yo creo de que esa es una buena opción, poderles dar semilla, capital semilla, y que ellos puedan optar por hacer sus propias cosas.
That's incredible. Thank you so much. Melissa, I wanted to get this topic in as something that's important to us at Arnold Ventures, but affordable housing. I know that there's an affordable housing crisis in a number of cities across the United States, but particularly in the Bay Area. What are some of the things that you've done in your work as mayor to ensure that housing is affordable, particularly knowing that most young people are renters?
So I'll start by saying I'm a renter, and I'm a proud renter, and it's very expensive to buy a home in Sausalito in my community, and I don't know if I'll ever be able to. But I'm not the worst off. The folks that are the worst off are the people that our community intentionally redlined when we had that opportunity after World War II and again in the 1970s. My community made a choice to allow certain folks to buy homes and others to not buy homes. And now we're in a situation where Sausalito is 92% white and our socioeconomic makeup is severely lacking diversity. And we've got something like just over 100 or 200 city employees with contractors, et cetera. Only 2 of those folks can live in our town. It is extremely expensive, and it is the root of why we have such huge problems with inequity. And the choices that we made before, we need to start fixing, and this is our chance to do that. So I am very committed to making Sausalito a more open and approachable and affordable community. The state has told all of our small towns, hey, listen up, you are not doing enough, and we're going to give you a requirement. This is how many homes you have to show us that you're able to build within the next 5 years. They do that for us every 5 years. We have a housing element cycle, every 5 years. So our number this year was 724 new units in a community that maybe has 7,500 people and about 3,000 units right now. So we're increasing our housing stock by almost 25%. But we have to actually build that housing stock. We can't just write it down on paper and zone it. We have to take action. So right now I am in talks with our state senator to partner with the state to have a 100% affordable project in our community where our former corporate yard was. So leveraging public land to turn it into 100% affordable housing opportunities for teachers and for seniors in my town. And this is an issue, I just want to add that the climate crisis is directly linked to the housing crisis because folks shouldn't have to drive 200 miles to get to work. And transportation is responsible for, in our community, 64% of our emissions. So if more of our city workers could live in our town as well, we would do more to meet our climate goals. So it's better for equity and social justice, it's better for our climate, and it's the right thing to do. I want a vibrant community, I want more culture, I want a place that I can be proud to raise my kids in, and we're taking steps to do that, but housing is the first way forward, and it is really the cornerstone of how we change things.
Thank you for that. All right, I'm looking at our timer here. I think we have a chance for about one more question. I just want to acknowledge that being a young person in politics is very difficult. Alex, one of the things we were discussing yesterday is you said, everyone is very rah-rah about young people being involved in politics to vote or to organize or to knock doors, but as soon as a young person runs for office, it's wait your turn. And I know, Rodrigo, you alluded to that as well. There's corruption, there's these deeply entrenched issues that, as a young person, it can be really hard to challenge. So why don't we start with you, Rodrigo? Like, what advice do you give to a young person who wants to get involved in politics? How do you stay hopeful and engaged and passionate about this work?
Bueno, yo creo que vivimos en una generación que ha tenido que entender que no podemos repetir la historia. La humanidad ha tenido que moverse y se ha tenido que enfrentar a tantos retos y que nosotros definitivamente los jóvenes estamos llamados a hacer el cambio. Y el cambio no es solamente votar, el cambio es participar en las elecciones. El cambio es levantar la mano y organizar la sociedad civil, la comunidad y decir propongamos algo distinto. Porque la óptica, digamos, ha cambiado un poco. Las necesidades de hoy de los jóvenes son muy distintas a las necesidades que tenían nuestros padres, nuestros abuelos, y somos nosotros definitivamente los que tenemos que enfrentarnos a temas que antes no eran agenda. La equidad de género antes no era agenda. El proteger la vida de los animales antes no hacía parte del paisaje, no había agenda para ello, por lo menos en Colombia. Todo lo que tiene que ver con la igualdad social, ¿no? La diversidad sexual son agendas propias de esta generación. Todo lo que tiene que ver con el cambio climático es una agenda que tenemos que empoderar a los jóvenes y tenemos que salir a luchar para que las condiciones de las futuras generaciones sean distintas. Si no lo hacemos nosotros, si no nos empoderamos nosotros, si los que sufrimos el problema y los que lo vamos a sufrir por el resto de nuestras vidas no lo hacemos, si no heredamos un mejor futuro para las próximas generaciones, pues lamentablemente la historia no nos va a servir para nada, porque somos nosotros definitivamente los que tenemos que empoderarnos, determinar efectivamente, leer esas condiciones de vida en las que estamos y poder enfrentarlas con determinación, participando. Y aquí es donde la política tiene que gustarnos, porque si uno no se mete con la política sí se mete con uno. Y el error roba las oportunidades, ¿sí? Entonces somos nosotros los jóvenes definitivamente los que tenemos que estar empoderados, organizando nuestras comunidades y participar para que así puedan llegar nuevas caras a la política, que tomen las decisiones, que inviertan bien el presupuesto y atiendan esas necesidades que son invisibles para los que no tienen que efectivamente sufrirlas.
Go right down the line.
The key is exactly in what you said: participation, participation, participation. And one of my favorite James Baldwin quotes that always speaks to me is, "The world is before you, and you need not take it or leave it as it was when you came in." So it is up to all of us right now. If you want things to change, listen, we woke up to a world that was not better than it was the day before. We are in a climate crisis, we're in a gun violence crisis, we're in a housing crisis, and if you're mad about it, young people, so am I. I'm mad, and that's part of why I got involved, right? Our institutions are broken. Capitalism is not working the way it's supposed to or the way it was designed to. And it is up to us, and it is up to all of you. I'm very happy to see so many folks participating in the Youth Summit, the Biennial Youth Summit, and I've had the chance to talk to some of you, and I believe you are going to fix this. I actually am leaving here with a lot more hope than I came with, because you are committed to making change. But that does not let all of the more seasoned lawmakers who are among us off the hook, because we need you to participate and partner with us. We need you to teach us the lessons so we can all learn from them, and we need you to step up, because this is life or death, truly, and if we don't have all of us at the table working together, we're never going to move forward. But there is a lot of hope. I said this yesterday to all of you. Hope is a form of planning, as Gloria Steinem says, and if we lose hope, we lose everything. So we need to come to the table and work together to really make these changes. The future is about solving our most pressing challenges, and the future is here right now in this room. So let's make it happen.
Sí, y al igual que, o complementando lo que decía la alcaldesa, y es justamente en el municipio, yo derroté a una persona políticamente hablando, ¿verdad? O la gente me eligió, al contrario de una persona que tenía 33 años de ejercer una política dentro del municipio. Pero no era precisamente porque se hiciera un buen trabajo que había durado mucho, sino más bien era porque no había realmente un contrapeso o una diversidad de ideas. Pero Dios, y yo lo pongo siempre adelante a Él, fue quien nos impulsó a 7 jóvenes dentro de mi municipio para que pudiéramos ejercer política joven. Fundamos un partido político nuevo hace poco en El Salvador. Nosotros fuimos parte incluso de la recolección de firmas para que se pudiera inscribir ante las autoridades correspondientes, y nosotros anduvimos buscando candidato, y yo era el que andaba buscando el candidato para mi municipio, pero nadie quería participar. Y fue justamente una de las reuniones, y yo creo que ellos van a ver esta entrevista y se van a recordar con mucha nostalgia. Dijimos, vamos a empoderarnos, y nosotros vamos a ser los que vamos a participar como alcaldes, como síndicos o como concejales. Y fue así como todo mi consejo es menor de 30 años de edad. Es menor de 30, y yo soy el más joven y es el que tengo el cargo más alto. En ese momento pues teníamos 22 años y soñábamos realmente llegar a la municipalidad y hacer las transformaciones sociales que ese momento exigía, y agregarnos también al gobierno para poder también apoyar desde donde estábamos. Entonces es justamente que así llegamos a la política, empoderándonos como jóvenes, y un llamado a ustedes, a los jóvenes, a que se impulsen. Y si no hay nadie más atrás quien les esté diciendo adelante, adelante, pues entonces ustedes solitos. Y realmente aquí estamos nosotros para apoyarnos. Si de pronto pues ustedes necesitan poder abordar una conversación con estos líderes jóvenes que también nos acompañan, y poder obtener algunas de las experiencias que nos pasaron siendo tan joven. No, porque eres muy joven no vas a poder gobernar la alcaldía. No, porque no estás preparado para poder ser alcalde. Es uno de los estigmas que se escuchan cuando estás joven, o cuando te ven pasar personas que llegan a ofertar productos o proyectos a tu municipalidad y preguntan, ¿y el alcalde quién es? Y yo soy el alcalde. Y no lo había saludado al alcalde. Bueno, sí, yo soy el alcalde. Mire, un gusto, de verdad. No creía que usted era alcalde, porque piensan que yo soy el asistente del alcalde, pero realmente eso no es un problema, sino más bien siento que estoy ejerciendo muy joven una política y tengo una gran responsabilidad tan joven. Y no es problema para mí. Yo creo que también para ustedes no sea un problema, empodérense y que muy pronto sus países también van a tener actores políticos menores de 30 años. No estamos diciendo que nuestras personas mayores que ejercen política sea mala, sino más bien nos complementamos. Yo tengo un equipo de personas que son mayores y que son prácticamente todos mis asesores. Alcalde, legalmente usted no puede hacer eso, alcalde necesita hacer esto. Y es ahí donde entra la experiencia de nuestros adultos. Muchas gracias.
To echo that, I have a jacket that says the city and it says my name, and right below it says the mayor, and I'm at an event that I threw in town, and somebody says, oh, you work for the office of the mayor? And I said, no, it says mayor right there. So to my fellow young people, I said this yesterday, a term I really hate is future leader. There's no such thing as a future leader unless you're an unborn baby. All of you right here are leaders, each and every one of you. If you came here, that means you care and you give a damn. I'm just going to be honest. So when you go back to your communities, wherever it is, whether it's Bolivia, it's Mexico, Canada, it does not matter. One thing that I want you to remember, there's strength in numbers. One of the reasons why so many older elected officials are so scared and threatened by young people, it's because we know how to organize. When the legislator wouldn't listen to me, we were trying to get free college in California, free community college. 2 days later, I showed up with 200 students at their door. We know how to use Instagram, we know how to use Facebook, we know how to use Twitter, and we know that we're all thinking on the exact same page. Now, I campaigned on a lot of the traditional boring stuff, public safety, balancing our budget, but then I got into office and I pivoted. I said, you know what, let's try to tackle some of these big, hard issues. So I introduced an equal pay ordinance that says if we catch you screwing somebody over financially, you can't do business in the city ever again, and there's no way to appeal that. It's thinking outside the box, which each and every one of us are good at. So another piece of advice, too, is to remember that whatever you're doing, it's for tomorrow. So one of the things that I did when I was still the student body president at my college was we started a free bus pass, school supplies, and breakfast program. And that thing got up and running, and the next semester I was gone. So I never directly benefited from it. I only saw the implementation and it actually executed. But when I still hear about years later after graduating from Contra Costa College in Richmond that program is still going on, it warms my heart. When I see my little cousins going to community college and they're getting that tuition free, and I know that was because of my advocacy along with my friends, it's the craziest thing ever. So you always want to plant that seed for tomorrow. And when you do hold that office, remember that you're setting the tone for the next, because two things that happen when you're young and you're elected, everyone thinks you want to be the president. I would never want to be the president. But they know that there's a chance that you might run for something bigger in the future. So remember those young electeds that are going to come after you, because there are going to be more people who are going to try to screw you over than there will be people who are trying to help you.
We are out of time, but I want to thank our panel for the inspiration, for your courage, for your leadership, and thank you all for joining us. Thank you.
Muchas gracias.
Please welcome to the stage White House Senior Advisor to the President, Mitch Landrieu.
Oh my goodness, how y'all doing? It's nice to see you. Let's try that one more time. How y'all doing? I'm from New Orleans, y'all. Y'all got it a little bit better than that. How y'all doing? We got some folks from the Emerson Collective. We're the students from the Emerson Collective. And there you go. It's great to see you. That panel was unbelievable, was it not? Is the future not bright? I also want to thank everybody who helped organize this conference. Specifically, you're going to hear from him in a little while. The Secretary of State is going to be with us, Tony Blinken, and of course, the Special Representative for City and State Diplomacy, Nina Hashigian. I met with Governor Polis, who's the governor of this great state, and Mayor Michael Hancock, as well as Senator John Hickenlooper, and you're about to hear, after I speak, from a great speaker who's with us today, Senator Michael Bennet, who is a great friend of mine. Senator, it's great to be with you. Thank you so much. And the entire congressional delegation in what is one of the fastest growing cities and states in the nation. So I'm thrilled to be here. I also want to just let all of you know that these forums are critically important because this is where we learn from one another. This is where we learn how to improve and to better deliver for the people that all of us represent. And I want to thank and speak directly to all the young mayors, all the young leaders that are with us today. I am, as was said when I was introduced, the senior advisor to the president. It is obviously and wonderfully an honor of a lifetime to be able to walk into the White House every day and to speak on behalf of President Biden because he is a great leader. But let me tell you something. I was a state legislator, I was a lieutenant governor, and I was the mayor of the great city of New Orleans after Katrina hit. Katrina, Rita, Ike, Gustav, the national recession, the BP oil spill. And I can tell you that I have never had a job that was more transformational and important, and nothing will ever compete with that experience. I don't want you to tell my boss I just said that because I love my job. But what I learned as a legislator and lieutenant governor, and particularly as mayor of the city of New Orleans, which I think is apropos for the city summit of the Americas, is that there is nothing that mayors cannot do, really, except technically declare wars and sign treaties. Yet we have some mayors from Ukraine here today who are heroes that I'll talk about in a minute, who in fact are fighting wars and impacting treaties in a long way, which is to say that it is the mayors of the world that will help shape the Western Hemisphere and a world that we strive for, a world that promotes and delivers inclusive economic growth, sustainability, resilience, equity, and, as importantly, transparency. It is these values that bind us. And mayors have the power to show and to speak that truth to the world. It is absolutely essential for all of the mayors that are in earshot to take that power and to use it loudly and proudly over and over again. I know for a fact that our cities are the laboratories of change, of innovation, and of evolution. And in our cities, we can build local solutions that tackle our greatest global challenges. That's why we say, think globally, act locally. So many of our challenges are common to us all, across geography, across the entire world. But I know that this room is not only filled with rising leaders across the Americas, we are all also joined, as I said a minute ago, by leaders and heroes from Ukraine who have shown incredible courage and leadership. So many of you here today have had to ask yourself, how will I rebuild my country? How will I rebuild my community? How will I rebuild my city and my country? And when you win this war of aggression, and you will win it, I want to challenge you to think beyond building it back like it was and build it back better than it ever was before. And America will be with you every step of the way as you fight to make that happen. We stand with all of you, and I would like all of you to give them a round of applause, if you will. Now, let me talk a little bit about how we see this moment in history. It goes without saying, or it should by now, that we are at an inflection point. We are at a unique time in the history of our country, in the history of the world. It is a time that presents immense dangers, immense challenges, and yes, therefore, immense opportunities, if we dare to seize them. You see, a nation's security is deeply embedded in two sides of the same coin. One is foreign policy, one is domestic policy. They are both interdependent, just like all of us are. One cannot survive without the other. They must walk hand in hand. In fact, I believe that you can't be strong abroad if you are not strong at home. And being strong at home and abroad both requires a strong economy. And that foundation of a strong economy is literally its country's infrastructure. It is the cornerstone upon which all else rests. That is why right now in the United States, we can confidently say that we emerged from the global pandemic because the President signed, with Congress's support, the most significant recovery package in history, the American Rescue Plan. We also passed the most significant investment in our infrastructure generations, the bipartisan infrastructure law that the senator sitting right over there helped shepherd through Congress. We're also bringing back manufacturing with the CHIPS bill and the clean energy jobs through the Inflation Reduction Act. We finally got a president who is putting his money and the country's money where his mouth is. And it is no surprise to me that he has been remarkably consistent his entire career. You know, Joe Biden once wrote, and I quote, "It is time for the federal government to take action to jumpstart our economic engine and to help us build a robust long-term economic growth. One factor that has exacerbated the weakening of our economy is the neglect of those economic components that we call infrastructure, our roads, our bridges, our dock facilities, and our water systems," and I close the quote. He wrote this not in 2022, not in 2012, not in 2002. He wrote it in July of 1992. Now that, my friends, is what steady, visionary leadership looks like over decades, with a guy that will not quit and insist on getting it done. And now, as president, he's seeing that vision through to completion, and we are getting the job done. Under this president's leadership, we are turning a corner, and we are building this country again. We are building our economy from the bottom up and the middle out through building our best infrastructure. And you know what? Unlike other folks, we're actually bringing the receipts. Let me give you a couple of them. 12.6 million jobs have been created since President Biden came into office. 8,000 of them have been manufacturing jobs. That's us making stuff here, not overseas. President Biden's federal investment have spurred, not surprisingly, private sector investment. How much? You should ask. A lot. $435 billion in private sector investment has followed the work that we've done. Now let me get into some specifics on what we've done and how we've delivered results, particularly when it comes to infrastructure, which, by the way, would not have been possible, as I have said, without the support of Senator Bennet, Senator Hickenlooper, and, by the way, the U.S. Conference of Mayors and the National League of Cities. This is how things work when you all work together and when you all show up for one fight. In the last 17 months, our administration has pushed out $210 billion in funding. We have over 25,000 projects in all 50 states. These awards and projects touch over 4,500 communities. We're laser focused on being on time, on task, and on budget, and making sure that we have no waste, fraud, and abuse, because we believe in transparency. We're talking about roads. We're talking about bridges. We're talking about airports. We're talking about ports. We're talking about waterways. We're talking about making sure that everybody has high-speed internet, because a little girl does not need to be sitting in the back of her mama's car outside of McDonald's trying to do her homework because she doesn't have internet. That's no way to being a global leader in America. That's no way to lift people up. Not to have that is to push people down. We're talking about clean air. We're talking about safe water that the senator and I were just talking about a minute ago, because not everybody in America has access to safe water. And we're talking about building a clean energy future. We have laid down 69,000 miles of roadway. We have fixed and are fixing 4,600 bridges. We have invested in 3,000 new clean transit school buses. We've invested $2 billion in restructuring airports, $7.5 billion in building an electrical vehicle network across this country, and upgrading our land ports of entry. And we're implementing the bipartisan infrastructure law with some core values in mind, because you know things function like they're designed. And if they're designed with good values, they will function well and for the right people. And so we insist on creating good-paying jobs. We are using products that are made in America. We are investing in equity and expanding access to opportunities so that nobody gets left behind. We're very interested in environmental justice, and of course you have to build with climate in mind so that you can be resilient, because we know what's coming our way. And as we invest, we are ensuring that no community and no person is left behind. That is what the President's Investing in America agenda is about. It's called the Blue Collar Blueprint to build our economy from the bottom up. This is also an opportunity to rectify and deliver on the past inequities that have plagued this country. Too often, in many instances, for communities of color, infrastructure divided these communities, displacing families, displacing churches. You've heard this before. Where you live at, that's how we say it in New Orleans. We live on the other side of. And if you're a person of color in this country, you generally live on the other side of the lake, the river, the road, the highway, because it went right down through the middle of it. We're fixing that. High-speed internet, $65 billion. Reconnecting communities, $1 billion. Clean water, $55 billion. Clean school buses. And 99% of the school buses have been purchased in communities that have been left behind. Climate resilience is another issue that we focus a lot of attention on because we have to get there sooner rather than later because we are in an existential crisis with our climate in the world as you know it. Strong labor standards are critically important in making sure that when we put people back to work, they can work, what the president says, with great dignity. Jobs that don't require a high school education, and then train people so that we can make all of this work in a way that is good for America. Again, national security in this country, foreign policy and domestic policy, two sides of a very important coin. We're talking about now this hemisphere. We could just as soon be talking about the world. And why? Because all of us are interdependent. We can learn from each other. Whether you're in the United States or whether you're in Colombia or in El Salvador, the people that were talking on the stage just a little while ago demonstrated to you why all of these problems have really common solutions. And it is the mayors of the world that are going to find the solutions. So let me begin to close with this. Change and progress on all points that I just laid out doesn't happen overnight. We will all have challenges along the way. This is just natural. It's the natural order of things. But here's the thing. We either have to find a way, or we have to make one. When President Biden's predecessor backed out of the Paris Climate Agreement, it was the cities, it was the mayors that stepped up to the plate. And that message was very, very powerful, mayors. It was cities and mayors who said that we are all here to meet the climate challenges while supporting a clean energy economy and supporting the workers that keep our country running. It was cities and mayors who kept us on the right path despite setbacks. They showed people who we really are and what we strive to become. And now, President Biden has shown extraordinary progress on the climate through passing the Inflation Reduction Act and the bipartisan infrastructure law, the largest investment in climate resilience in the country's history. And again, it was the mayors that helped get it done. Now, give yourself a round of applause. You should. Now, let me just say this. It's time for us to work together. It's time for us to capitalize on this moment, to keep delivering results. In order to do that, it has to be strong partnerships across all levels of government. I learned as mayor that you cannot do this without the help of other partners. I learned that our local leaders shape the safety, access to opportunity, and resilience of communities in their cities. You all have unbelievable power to impact the daily lives of the people that you serve, but it is critical also for you to work with your regional partners, to work with the state, to work with the federal government, because we are now in a moment that requires a one-team, one-fight mission. That is the best and only way to get it done. And by the way, we in the federal government understand, know, running to the fire, that we need to work with each and every one of you to make results happen. This partnership only works when we see each other as fully involved partners. And that's why, in my current role, I have spoken to almost every governor in the nation. I have had over 1,700 conversations with officials across the country, traveled to over 40 cities, gone to nearly 30 states. As we fight for a Western Hemisphere and a world of democracy and freedom that is rooted in economic opportunity, in growth, in resilience, in equity, in sustainability, and transparency, we know without a doubt, you should know without a doubt, that those are the ties that bind us. And my friends, my fellow mayors, my young leaders, no matter where you have come, you all of you, have been called to be the ones that actually do the binding. So let's get back to work, and let's get out there. Let's finish the job. God bless you all, and thank you so much.
Please welcome to the stage United States Senator from Colorado, Michael Bennet.
Well, good afternoon. My name is Michael Bennet, and I represent Colorado in the United States Senate. We are honored to host you and to host the city summit in Colorado. You may not know this, some of you, but you are in the most beautiful place in America here in Colorado. At least I think so. I would say the most beautiful place in the Americas because I know when we come to visit your country, you'll say the same thing. But it is a beautiful hemisphere, and this is the perfect place, I think, for this gathering because in so many ways, Colorado embodies the shared cultural and economic and political ties all across the Americas. Colorado, obviously, to begin with, is a Spanish word named for the red-colored water of the river that flows through our state, a state that they used to call the Great American Desert. If you drive south of here to the San Luis Valley, you'll find Spanish land-grant ranches from a time when that part of the state lay within Spain's Mexican territory. You'll find a stone marker of the state's first irrigation ditch called the People's Ditch with the names of farmers and ranchers who were entitled to draw water from that ditch. Among them is the name Salazar, and my predecessor in the Senate, Ken Salazar, comes from that family, and today he's our ambassador to Mexico. Yeah, Ken. Before I replaced Ken Salazar in the Senate, I was superintendent of the Denver Public Schools here in Denver. In fact, we used to have many of our meetings here in this very building. The Denver Public Schools is a school district that's about 60% Latino. Many of Denver's families had been in Colorado for generations, like Ken's family had been here for generations, centuries before any English speaker had ever been here. Others were new to the U.S., brought across our southern border seeking safety or opportunity. If these deep, rich ties across the Americas are obvious to Colorado, and they are obvious to Colorado, they must have been much less obvious, I think, to Washington, D.C. When I was growing up, Washington viewed its engagement in the hemisphere through the unforgiving lens of the Cold War. And as the people in this room know, this sometimes led us to make egregious mistakes and betray our democratic values. After the Cold War, Washington replaced a fight against the Soviet Union with a narrow focus on migration and drug trafficking. And while those issues remain critically important, they're just a fraction of the work that we have to do together. And during that time, the time that we were engaged in two wars that lasted for 20 years in the Middle East, China rushed to fill the void with a surge of trade, investment, and technology. Since the year 2000, trade between China and Latin America grew from almost $12 billion to $445 billion, almost 40-fold. China is now the top trading partner for all of South America and second only to the U.S. for all of Latin America. Since 2005, Chinese-owned state banks have lent nearly $140 billion to governments in Latin America. China's One Belt and Road Initiative has built dams and ports and railways, expanded internet access, and deployed 5G from Mexico City to Rio. And I can understand, it's not hard to understand, why so many governments in the Americas are deepening their ties with China, especially when the United States was really nowhere to be found. But this has also come at a price. Cheap Chinese imports undercut local industries and jobs in the Americas, just like they did in the United States. Beijing's loans might have come with fewer strings, but they also come at the expense of labor, the environment, and the rule of law. And what strings Beijing did attach often required governments to repay loans with precious natural resources or to give Chinese firms privileged access to your telecommunications or energy sectors. And at the same time, Beijing has exported its surveillance state all across the Americas as it has all across the world. They've equipped some nations with thousands of facial recognition cameras. And in one other country, they're helping create quote-unquote fatherland cards for every citizen that the government could use to silence dissent and control access to vital government services. And in exchange for internet access from companies like Huawei, some governments have risked handing Beijing a backdoor to track every conversation in their borders. And while I know that ties with Beijing come with real, tangible, short-term benefits, they've come with a long-term troubling agenda. Turn back the clock to a time when governments should ignore the people they serve and disregard concerns about human rights and labor and the environment. That's not a world we should want to live in. And it's not a future for the Americas we should accept as stewards of the next generation in your countries or in mine. And I'm not here today just to complain about China. I came to challenge my own government to finally offer a compelling alternative, to live up to our values in our shared struggle for democracy, and to say that if it was a mistake years ago to make our engagement in the Americas all about the Soviet Union, it would be a mistake today to make it all about China. We should understand and we should deepen our partnership with the Americas for its own sake, for our own sake. And there are so many opportunities for progress. On trade, let's bring the jobs and industry we exported back to China and to Southeast Asia to our hemisphere. Costa Rica's partnership with Intel is a perfect example of how we can create jobs and secure our supply chains as a hemisphere. For the first time since Ronald Reagan was our president, the United States has finally passed a bill to bring an industry, the semiconductor industry, back to the United States of America. We should build on that here in this hemisphere. On climate, between Latin America's abundant critical minerals and our abundant oil and natural gas, our hemisphere has everything it needs to achieve energy independence, to set an example to the world of a more integrated, secure, and resilient energy infrastructure, and to lead the global transition to clean energy, and to show people how we can create jobs while we're doing that. On migration, it is past time for the United States to fix our broken immigration system. And we can start by passing a bill that I helped write in 2013 that provided a pathway to citizenship for 11 million undocumented people that are here, that gave a pathway to the dreamers that know no other country but our own, that modernized our visa system and secured our border with 21st century border security, not a medieval wall. And speaking of medieval, we have to reform the investment bodies that haven't kept pace with the 21st century. We need to cut the red tape and make it much easier for governments and businesses in the Americas to access investments from institutions like the Development Finance Corporation, the World Bank, and the IADB. And I see no reason, especially when I see the young people that are here, why we can't double or even triple opportunities for people in our hemisphere to learn from one another, students, Peace Corps volunteers, doctors, entrepreneurs, authors, artists, climate activists. Whatever we do, we cannot let another 40 years pass without seizing the enormous opportunity for partnership across the Americas, because as Colorado shows, we share more than a hemisphere. We share a braided culture, an economy, and a people, and we share a common destiny. Let's write that together. Thank you for having me today. Thanks for being here today.